Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is proud to say that once again, the presenting sponsor for Season 8 is Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. First off, thanks to so many of you listeners out there who not only decided to purchase a vehicle from this family-owned business in the last 2 years, but also shared with them that it was directly because of their support of this show. That's what community, even in our virtual format, is all about. Second, Townsend Automotive, celebrating 49 years serving West Alabama, has been extending its reach so that you don't even have to be in the Tuscaloosa area to purchase a car from them. Nationwide vehicle delivery service is available for Southern Fork listeners, and it's something that makes buying just the right new or certified pre-owned vehicle even easier. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or, of course, if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive always salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. Jeremy Carter of Tarpon Cellars is more than just a winemaker. He's a student of taste, and he built his palate first in the South. A Georgia native, Jeremy attended Florida State University before moving to the Napa Valley in 2007 for an internship at his uncle's winery in Rutherford. He would soon hone his winemaking acumen through various positions at Luna, Chappellet, and Duckhorn, while also studying winemaking at UC Davis. We recorded this interview during the Charleston Wine Food Festival, and this week, Jeremy was named one of the VinePair 50, a big accolade from the publication that is recognizing talented individuals doing great things to make the drink space better and more creative. As VinePair writes, Carter's goal is to introduce American wine lovers to grapes prominent in international regions but uncommon in California markets. And I'd add that he's creating wine that pairs perfectly with cuisine and climate in the South. For Jeremy, it's beyond the bottle to the sustainability, the community, and the communing around the table. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me so much.
Yes, well, I was so excited. Just as I was telling you off mic, I've had your wines at Basic Kitchen, and I love the list at Basic, so I'm always interested in those really light, mineral-driven whites, and I love how they pair stuff there. They have a great beverage program, and so I just was aware of you from that, and then saw that you were coming here. And so I just was really excited to sit down with you. So thank you so much.
No, I really appreciate that. And I'm a huge fan of Basic Kitchen as well, and Ben and Kate as people. And they were actually a big reason why I kind of moved to Charleston, to be honest. So we can get into that. But that's awesome that's where you made the connection.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want to get into this idea of being a Southerner and making wine and having a palate. And, really, generationally, we've only really embraced it as a culture the last few generations, right? Maybe the last 50 or 60 years.
In America especially, yeah.
Yeah. And the South is always kind of leading the caboose area of that.
No comment.
It's pretty gutsy to get to that place from Atlanta, from growing up and, from deciding, hey, I want to build. What brought you to wine, and what was the first thing you thought about making it? Because a lot of people just want to drink it, they want to sell it, but making it is a whole different animal.
Absolutely. No, it's funny because I read a lot of these, bios or stories about other people in our industry. And, they, a lot of times, my parents were giving me white Burgundy when I was 8 years old at the dinner table, cut with water. And, our family was not that, at all. And in fact, I did an interview with, another, media personality, and I told them kind of off the record, I was making a joke. I was like, no, my mom drank Smirnoff Ice growing up, and she printed that. I don't know if my mom appreciated that, but, that's the,
but it's out there now, so we're repeating it.
Exactly.
Sorry, Mom.
She hated it so much I have to tell the story twice. No, I mean, I went to college in Tallahassee, Florida, at Florida State, and it was certainly not, enjoying fine wine, during the early part of my college career. But I think I was in college a while. I think I was there for 6.5 years, and towards the end of it, I started to go to nicer restaurants in Tallahassee, and I always compare it to kind of like, when you go to a museum or something and see a work of art that really speaks to you for the first time, and you don't know why or how to describe it, but it just kind of speaks to you. And I had a meal like that in Tallahassee, and was lucky enough to go to New York and have a couple more meals like that. Got really into food and really into wine, and kind of wanted to go to culinary school, but my parents kind of told me that I'd been a student for long enough, and it was time to get a job.
They're like, you can do it. You eat. Just go.
And so, but I did feel like that was, a community that I wanted to be a part of. And so,
right.
I applied to a lot of different jobs, restaurant wise, wine bar wise, breweries, distilleries. And I got an internship basically right out of school in, Napa Valley, a small family winery in Rutherford. And drove all the way out there from Atlanta with basically everything that I owned in a truck, and kind of didn't know what was next. I wanted to do an internship and come back to Atlanta and maybe open a wine bar or something. Mm-hmm. But when I got out there, I realized that the internship that I had signed up for was not in hospitality. I think I kind of envisioned myself like sitting in the tasting room, like swirling wine and the air conditioning, having this really cool job that I could tell my friends about.
Do you like dirt?
They were like, go outside and sample grapes. And, but mostly I was in the cellar actually. And so I was, scrubbing tanks and cleaning barrels and driving a forklift, which I probably should not have been doing at the time. But, I really enjoyed it. I loved the seasonality of it. I loved working with my hands and the creative outlet, in winemaking. And, so I stayed, went to UC Davis for winemaking, kind of did that program, as a distance learning program while I was working at other wineries. Worked in Napa, Sonoma, in New Zealand for about 10 years. Duckhorn, Chappellet, had some great experiences there and learned a lot. And then we started our brand in 2017.
Wow. And it's lovely.
Thank you so much.
I was so excited to talk to you because, I was a spirits writer. So definitely in that space, and then beer. But really what wine has recently captured my imagination from a creative standpoint, not just an imbibing standpoint. And what got me was I already focus on local, sustainable, and a lot of farming and how the land actually shows up through the grapes. Now we have this whole idea of low intervention or minimal intervention wines. And as a winemaker, you're shaping and crafting. From our standpoint, you already kind of are an alchemist, but then you have this low intervention thing. So how do you define your work? Obviously, you can't teach us how to be a winemaker. You've been doing this for a long time, as you just explained. But how do you define it internally? Because we all have to define our work and kind of figure out where are my edges, where are my fences.
No, that's a great question. I mean, I think, it's cliche to say at this point, but like all good winemaking starts in the vineyard. And so we partner with really, really good farmers, who I trust and they trust me. And we actually end up farming a little bit differently, I think, than some of the more traditional wineries in California. They know that I'm looking for that kind of, high acid, bone dry, really crisp, as you mentioned, style, which I think is exciting for them.
I'm so thirsty right now.
I know we need an ice cold glass of Verdejo or something.
Yeah.
And the sustainability aspect is really important to us as well. And so the main grower that we work with for the Cambaro series, which is the wines with the crab label, they're fifth generation farming family, practicing biodynamic, certified sustainable. And so that's kind of, I don't look at that as even like a marketing aspect. It's more of just like we would only work with growers that, are committed to being good stewards of the land. But in the creative process, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like I get the most, the biggest part of my creative outlet, I think, is the blending process. With our fermentations, I really, when we pick is probably the most important decision that I make. There's 1,000 micro decisions that you make as a winemaker that all affect the wine in different ways. But I think really when you pick, retaining that acid, making sure that the sugars aren't really high, making sure that the flavors aren't overly ripe. But then also, we're lucky that we work with a vineyard, a lot of vineyards that, they don't have issues with pyrazines or like that bell pepper. Sometimes if you pick too early, it can be too green. So there's a balance there. But I really just like to kind of let the fruit speak for itself and for that particular vintage as well, because each year is different and we're okay with that. We're not trying to make the same wine every single year.
Right.
So I try to let them speak for themselves. But then when we're doing these 4 blends, it's kind of a luxury. We have, I think, 16 different grapes to work from. They can all go into these 4 wines. And, our 4 blends, it's a white blend, a rosé, a skin contact or orange wine, and that lighter red, the chilled red. Those are so kind of out of the box that we can really, I mean, we don't typically put red wines into the white blend, but everything else, kind of anything goes. I mean, we add some Muscat Canelli to our rosé sometimes. We add some Nebbiolo to the skin contact sometimes. So it's really an outlet for me to say, okay, what is going to be the best possible blend, and use what I've learned over the years with my palate to kind of achieve something that is still going to speak to that vintage, and that place. But also be the best expression of that.
I have a couple questions actually about the vineyards. When you were saying all those grapes, and of course you're going to source those grapes, but you're getting those grapes from like a particular hillside, or did you hear that? That was like North Carolina mountain accent for a second. That. I almost said, like, you're getting it from that hillside. And I was like, no, you know how to pronounce it now. Try again, ma'am. Sorry, I sidetracked myself with my own accent for a second. But you're picking those. Do the grapes varieties ever butt up against each other? Is there ever any danger of cross-pollination with bees or anything? And hybrids, is that an issue, or is that something you let just kind of do its thing? Or
no, I mean we do have blocks that border each other, but the way that it's grafted onto the rootstock, you don't see any like cross pollination or anything. It's the same every year.
Cool. You got owls. Do those people have owls?
They have owls.
Into owls right now.
Everything. I always I always tell people when I'm looking for possible vineyard sources, if I walk the vineyard and it's like pristine and beautiful and I don't hear birds and see bugs and if the floor is perfectly manicured, it's probably not, unfortunately, a vineyard that I want to work with, because I don't feel like it's a full ecosystem. And so, when I'm walking this particular vineyard in Clarksburg, like, there's spiders, there's lizards, there's birds, there's owls. I think they introduced, like gophers or some other animal to kind of, take care of the rodents. And like, I mean, it's a fully functioning ecosystem. And so, and I love that. And it's messy and it doesn't look pristine because they're not using pesticides or herbicides. So I appreciate that and I enjoy it. So it's funny, the prettiest vineyards are not always the ones that grow the best grapes.
That's really interesting. I never really thought about that. But yeah, you're going to have weeds. You're going to have some weeds out there. How do you know when to add a bottle, or, like you say, you have 4 red blends and you have 4 blended blends Gosh, I need a beverage. I'm going to so edit that whole moment out. So you have a whole blended program. How do you know when it's time as a creative to kind of add that?
To add like a new blend?
Yeah, like a new blend, or, I want to do this particular vintage. Do the grapes kind of tell you, or do you think, okay, because there is a melding here of business and creativity too, right?
Definitely. And there's a little bit of, what can the market support? Like I always tell a story about when I was at UC Davis. One of the professors said, we were talking about like these unique esoteric wines that, weren't really big, but all the winemakers loved and all the somms loved. And he's like, well, let me just tell you, if you build a business around making wine that like you and your nerdy winemaker friends drink, like you're not going to be in business for very long. And so there's some of that, but I will say that we've really I felt that my job is to make wines that I like and that people will appreciate, and we still want to make them approachable, so that, everybody can enjoy them. However, my job is to get out and educate people about, orange wines and carbonic maceration and, these unique varietals that people aren't necessarily used to drinking. So, I feel like we've kind of gone against that advice. You probably wouldn't be thrilled with me. And it's still working so far. Yeah. I'm sorry. What was the original question? I feel like I went off on a tangent there.
No, that's great. How do you know when it's time?
Oh, yes. So some of that is, I knew that we wanted to make like a bone dry crisp rosé. That was, an easy decision. I knew that we wanted to make a white blend that was Vino Verde-ish. I felt like there were spots, in restaurants, especially where I saw those fitting. But sometimes, like this past year, we did a Gewürztraminer from that same vineyard in Clarksburg, and I did it on the skins as a skin contact, thinking that it might be a good complement into our skin contact blend. And it was so unique and so aromatic that when I was doing the blending trials about 2 months ago, I was like, well, this needs to be its own wine. It's cool. It's strong enough to stand on its own, and it's so different than our current skin contact blend. And so it might be something that's only, 150, 200 cases. It might be Wine Club or like just for Charleston or just for Austin or whatever. But so sometimes it just comes like that. And then sometimes I get introduced to a grower and he'll say, I have this small block of actually, there was a block of Gewürztraminer in Russian River that I met a guy in about 3 or 4 years ago. And so we started making that, and we do it in a concrete egg. And I knew that I wanted to do an aromatic white in a concrete egg at some point. And so that opportunity just kind of came along.
All right. So the Fork listeners are like, what is a concrete egg?
So
it's pretty cool though. I like wine and concrete. So yeah.
I love wine in concrete. When I was at Chappellet, we made a Chenin Blanc in a concrete egg, and that was 12 years ago or whatever. And I've been fascinated with it ever since. And it really adds like a texture, but it looks, for people trying to visualize it, it looks just like what it sounds like. It's a 12-foot tall egg shape made orb made out of concrete.
And so you're using that instead of a barrel, right?
Yes, to ferment and age.
Right. So, and what does the concrete lend?
So, a couple things. The fermentation, and this is getting kind of sciencey, so I hope that's okay.
I love sciencey. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't going sciencey.
You can tell how smart I am by the fact that I use the word sciencey.
Well, I just said hillside, so we're even.
But there's a couple of things. The vortex at the bottom of the egg, the cone shape at the bottom of the egg, I should say, kind of creates this vortex during fermentation. And so it keeps some of the heavier lees constantly flowing and circulating. And
because there's movement during fermentation.
There's movement.
Yes. And
if you open up the top of that egg, you'll see it. And there's foam on the top, and it looks like an IPA in there at that point because it's hazy and foamy and a lot of stuff going on.
Funky. So yeasty.
A little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that vortex, adds an element of texture. And then, I think, and I don't know that there's scientific studies that show this, but I feel like the concrete, on something that's as gentle as a Gewürztraminer, it lends it some minerality. And that could be just me totally making that up. But I mean, we've done side by sides of a barrel ferment.
Just keep repeating it.
Yeah. If you say it long enough, it'll be true.
That's what we've learned in the last 8 years. Just keep repeating it.
We've definitely learned that in the last 8 years. Yes.
Well, that's cool. And that's to me, not a grape that I would really associate very much with California. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a little bit of history there, but, I think when people hear Gewürztraminer and they think, syrupy sweet.
Yeah.
And ours is bone dry. We ferment every single gram of sugar out of it. And so it's this really lean, but it's a highly aromatic grape. And I love aromatics. So I've always been, Riesling is my favorite grape in the world. And I haven't found a grower doing Riesling in California well enough to make our own yet. We've actually even been looking at Finger Lakes in New York to possibly try to do.
Oh my gosh. I had such a good, I think it's Ravenous Riesling recently. I really enjoyed that Riesling, and I would see Riesling on a list. That's a Finger Lakes, upstate New York wine. And I would normally see Riesling on a list and just kind of skirt around it because I'm thinking sweet.
Totally.
But it wasn't. It was textured. I love Chenin. So it felt like a little more Chenin-esque.
Yeah. But with those really cool aromatics.
Right.
Empire Estate is another one that I love. They're on the list at Tippling House and Chasing Sage, and I always, if I see that on a list anywhere, I order it because it's just so good. But anyways, we love the aromatics of the Gewürztraminer, and so being able to do it in a way that's dry, I think, is kind of catches people off guard.
Right. So you have these wines, and you're going out and you're doing this education. How do you deal with the entire lexicon as you're teaching people, from wine professionals, from restaurateurs, to doing tastings? You did a wine dinner a few months ago, right? So I know you do them all the time, but I got an email about a wine dinner you did a few months ago. So how do you deal with teaching that lexicon, that vocabulary, and connecting it to palate in an approachable way that isn't intimidating? Because I ask this all the time. Certain things kind of ruined us, like movies and stuff in the U.S. about this kind of discussion, right? Totally.
And let me just say that if we, as an industry, were better at that, we would be selling a lot more wine.
Yeah.
Because it is intimidating. And I try to always cater it to, the audience. I feel like, if I'm at a wine dinner, with, 40 or 50 people, and I start talking about our pH levels in soil and microbial stability, their eyes are going to glaze over. And so I tried to take what I think is interesting about the grapes that we're using and the techniques, the winemaking techniques that we're using.
The concrete egg is a good move.
The concrete egg is fun. People love hearing about orange wine because it's you tell the story about how, white grapes are normally fermented, just the juice, and red grapes are fermented on the skins. And this is taking white grapes, but making it like a red wine. And people love that story. Our carbonic maceration, our wine that's used, that's made using that technique, that chilled red, that's an interesting, technique. But I feel like if you get too in the weeds, people just tune out and they're like, hey man, let me just enjoy this rosé. But the cool thing is that, when I'm meeting with, somms and some buyers, they skew a little bit more nerdy, and I love to get into that with them. And so I've always said that I want to make wines that, and this is good from a business perspective, but it's really just even from a being able to enjoy it perspective. I want to make wines that are unique and fun and interesting to, my nerdy friends. But then if my dad's buddies are getting done with a round of golf or something, if they don't enjoy it, then we're not going to be able to sell a lot of it.
Right.
So I think it's making those wines that are fun and unique and interesting, but then also approachable. And especially our orange wine, you see so many orange wines that are, super, super funky, and they're great to, try and have a glass, but they're not crushable. And so we try to make wines that are crushable, I guess. We don't put that on the website, but maybe we should.
That's a good one. Yes. Just use it now.
Yeah.
Well, in the crushable vein, there really has been a shift in, the way it's corked, the way it's capped. And so, corks used to be the standard, and anything that was a screw top was Boone's Farm, and we joked about it, right?
Right.
So now you even have bottle caps. There's a lot of bottle caps. And so what is exciting about that to you as a winemaker, and how do you make that choice? Because, we're trying to figure out if it has a crab on the bottle, is that the one we go for? Do we like that label with the chicken? Do we need it?
A lot of animals out there.
A lot of animals for America.
And I'm just as guilty as anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. There's goats, there's chickens, there's crabs,
we have a tarpon, we have a butterfly.
There you go. So it's a few different things.
We have an oyster.
Yeah. Oh, I love the oyster one. But, and then, we're reading the back and we're trying to figure it out. So now we got to think about, is this capped correctly? How do you decide? Does it get a bottle cap? Does it get a cork?
So, I think it's great. First of all, there are so many options now. Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing for me is finding a combination of quality for the wine and pair that with sustainability. Bottle caps we actually are using for our pet nat and stuff like that. I think there's a very specific use case for that. But cork is still the most sustainable closure in the world. And so as the technology has gotten better for corks as far as like having less TCA, which when people say a wine is corked, that's what it is contaminated with, is TCA. Mm-hmm. And it gives it that kind of like wet newspaper, grandma's basement smell. But we're seeing less and less of that because the technology is getting better to eliminate that in the cork making process, I guess. So we use corks for everything that's not our pet nat, and we work with a really sustainable, it's like a a carbon neutral facility, in Napa that they make great corks. They're part of the Forestry Stewardship Council. And so that's really important to us. And if there's a way to use the most sustainable closure and have it not, affect us from a quality standpoint, that's what we're going to do.
That's cool.
But I will say, I lived in New Zealand for a year and worked at a winery down there. And you can get $150 bottle of Pinot that has a screw cap on it. I think that quality connotation from a screw cap is going away, and for good reason. I have no qualms when somebody brings me out a bottle of wine in a restaurant with a screw cap. And honestly, if you're taking it on a boat or something like that, when you don't have access to a corkscrew, it sounds great.
And if you have a pet nat with a bottle cap, that means you have to finish it.
That's true. It's not usually a problem for us, I'm assuming.
No, not for me. I just put a straw in. So using the word crushable, you are really crushing it. And I'm excited to chat with you because I think you're really creative and you're doing some really wonderful stuff, but it's not weird. And that's a really hard space to hit. Like you were just saying, golf buddies and nerd songs, right?
You don't see them together very often.
No, they don't hang out except at my parties. But that's a sweet spot to get to, and you have to be really creative. What is making you hungry? What are you percolating now on that's really capturing your creative imagination?
And that's a great question. I will say that one of the things that I'm most excited about in the last few years is, I haven't really told the story, but I was able to get to a place where I was doing so much business in the Southeast and East Coast that I got a place in Charleston, and I spend about half the year, in the South and now into the Northeast as well, but on this side of the country. And being gone for 15 years, I don't know that I necessarily had, my finger on the pulse of what was happening in the South, and now going to all these cities that, I considered kind of part of my home for a long time, and seeing all the creative food and still using Southern ingredients. I think Chino talked about this in your podcast, which I thought was so cool. He mentioned, there's a difference between Southern cooking and what people think of that as a genre and using Southern ingredients, but using different techniques. And he said it better than I could, obviously, but I find that to be so exciting. And so when I go to, Nashville and go to Henrietta Red, and when I go to Birmingham.
I love Henrietta Red.
Oh my gosh, they're so great. And Julia is so sweet.
Julia's so great. Mm-hmm.
And I've really made a lot of connections through Oyster South, the nonprofit that we work with, and Julia was one of those. But, when I go to Savannah and go eat at, Husk and Common Thread, and Late Air was another amazing meal that I had there the last time I was there.
I have not been there yet.
I think it opened like the week before I was there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But they're doing some incredible things. And, Rob McDaniel at Helen is incredible. And so I feel like going around to all these communities in the South and seeing this new generation of chefs that are taking, Southern ingredients, but doing things that are creative with them, but while still keeping, the past alive. Rob's restaurant, Helen, is named after his grandmother. So he has like this tomato pie recipe that's incredible.
Oh man, it brought a tear.
Right?
I was by myself because I was sitting at the chef thing, and it came and it had its own personal photo shoot. So 10 minutes after I've taken 80 photos, I took a bite of it and I was just like, okay. And I wanted to look around and be like, this is really good. But there was like, there's a point where they're like, something weird is happening over there. There's one woman and she's eating like 83 plates by herself.
Right.
And she keeps crying. So we're not going to engage.
That's so funny. He's one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Well.
He's wonderful.
And, but I think that's what keeps me hungry is, every time I go to, a city kind of in our geographic footprint of where we're selling wine. And I feel so lucky to be able to do that with this job. But, I meet people and try new restaurants, and it's just really, really exciting to me.
And then when you're making wine and blending, it's almost like it's a silent collaborator because you have informed your palate with their cooking. And then I like 100%. To think about that idea. And then 100%. You're making wines that are going to pair. Even though you're not consciously thinking about it, it's just part of your palate now. So.
No, it's absolutely true. And, I think we've always designed wines that, were suited for the climate that we have in the South, and also the food. But you're right. I mean, sometimes like when I'm smelling a fermentation, I think about like a, Barrier Island oyster or something. And it's just really cool. I'm like, oh, this is going to go great.
Yeah, that's cool. What is one aspect of your job that you finally discovered after, a decade of schooling that really meshes like a puzzle piece with an aspect of your natural personality?
I mean, I will say that what we just talked about has been really incredible, being able to travel around and meet people and eat at all these restaurants in the South after being gone for 15 years. But I think for me personally, just the combination and dichotomy of, when you're in the cellar, like you are alone. And when you're in the lab doing the blending trials, it's a very solitary endeavor. And
as we were discussing off mic, I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up.
No, I was very lonely for the first 10 years of my career because I was like working, in silence, and I wasn't getting out to see people. But now that, we have this brand and I'm kind of doing both, we do a ton of wine dinners, in the Southeast and really all across the country. We do music festivals. We do music, wine and food dinners. And so I feel like I get to have this social aspect. But then, at times when I need to return to kind of the creative, solitary, confines of winemaking. So it really has been for the last, I would say 3 or 4 years, kind of the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah. I know exactly what that feels like. That's nice. And it's also, it gets itchy if you're into one aspect of it. If you're too social for too long, you need the quiet cocoon of work, right?
Exactly.
And digging in and just kind of focus. But if you're doing that too much, then it's itchy and you need to go out and about. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I get it. All right, good. We should have some wine and talk about that. Quick fire, one thing keeping you up at night.
Quick fire. I will say from a literal standpoint, I'm sleeping a lot better lately than I ever have. I think it's a combination of feeling fulfilled in what I'm doing and taking care of myself a little bit more, learning how to be happy, but in a figurative sense. I think there's a lot of different ways I could go, but since you're telling me to do quick fire, I'm just going to give you one. But I feel like, being I don't want to say a role model, but I feel like supporting and encouraging young people, whether they're in our industry or any creative, endeavor, artists, musicians, writers, anything. I feel like my 20s were really tough for me because I didn't have necessarily a mentor or even just somebody that kind of encouraged me to just give me that little nudge. I feel like sometimes all somebody needs is a nudge to say like, you're doing really well and you should keep doing this and keep following your passion or your dream. And so I feel like getting to know so many young people in our travels and in this industry, I feel like it's I want to be that for people that they can feel supported and ask questions and even just see somebody from afar that, is running a business in a way that's, probably different than the way that our parents ran a business. And
right.
It's more heart centered and more about community and bringing people together than, profit margins and stuff like that. So I feel like that's really becoming more of my purpose as I get older. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but
your skincare is really good, no matter what age it is.
It's Botox, baby.
I know. I keep looking at the needle. I'm afraid. So I am so thrilled to have the chance to sit with you. I know it's creepy to have a fangirl that you didn't know that you had until like 10 minutes before I'm like, come to my hotel room at Fulton Lane Inn and let's have a chat inside the room. It's not creepy.
I wish this happened more often.
But I am thrilled and to welcome you to the Southern Fork family and community. It is something that I take very seriously. And I do reserve this last question for Southern Fork guests. And it is my magic picnic basket question. So I repeat this a lot, but I like to repeat it. I don't believe in the death penalty. And so we would often ask that death for a meal. And I just realized I want to talk about life-giving food. So I would like to put together a picnic basket of some foods that bring you life. And with this magic picnic basket, I can time travel. I can go back and ask anybody to make one more bite of something you love and you'd love to taste again. I can source for you and I can cook a little bit. Maybe just a mignonette for those Barrier Island oysters. I can definitely whip that up for you.
That sounds great to me.
So it doesn't have to go together. It doesn't have to be like an organized picnic. I just like to bring you some of your favorite things. What can I bring you?
That sounds so fun. I definitely could not have a picnic basket without oysters. And there's so many, great farmers throughout the Southeast, that I don't want to limit it to just one. But,
right.
Southern oysters has really been a passion of mine the last few years. And so I would start with that and maybe like a champagne from France. Savart is a good choice. And then I do love a taco truck taco. And there's one in particular that's, in Yountville that's kind of close to the winery. And I'm blanking on the name right now, but maybe that's like round 2. Caviar sandwich from Chubby Fish sounds pretty good.
Had it last night.
Oh my gosh.
You levitate off the chair just a little bit, right? You're just like, oh yes.
It is so good. Robert Daniels tomato sandwich might be in the running.
Tomato pie.
Yes. Yeah. I could list, so many foods and wines like that, but I think, and this is probably cliche, but the most important thing to me is being able to do it with people that I admire and care about and have the same values that I do. And it kind of reminds me of when I was in Savannah at Late Air. I was hanging out with Chino and some old friends I haven't seen in forever. And, we just had the best experience. And then we went to a Susto concert after. And I was like, I woke up the next morning and I was like, man, if I just had one night to go, that would have been a pretty good one. And we're lucky in our industry that we get to experience a lot of nights like that. And I don't take that for granted. But it really is for me, like that picnic basket. I could, list you 50 things. And if I was eating it by myself, it still wouldn't be, as fun as it is to go to a restaurant with people you care about and drink good wine and good food. So.
Yeah. Love it. Well, if people want to learn more about Jeremy, you know where to go. Go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there so you can check out his wines online and see the butterfly, the oyster, and the crab and, mental notes for your next shopping trip. But, or to ask your local wine shop to start carrying them or have Jeremy in for tasting, that'd be great too. If you like what you hear, yes, there's more wine happening in the Southern Fork archives than has ever happened. Why? I just really am very captured by the imagination of winemaking right now. I think it is a very exciting time to be tasting and sipping and talking about wine. And to me, you're right there in the thick of it. So thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it and love what you guys do.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. I really enjoyed this conversation with Jeremy, and I was struck in the editing process with the idea that sometimes it does take us a while to find, something that we really lock in with, like a puzzle piece, like that question I ask at the end. And sometimes it's just something that's so fun, we can't imagine that that's the direction that we want to go. I don't know about you, but in my life, I love doing this work, but sometimes I'm like, I love doing it. Should I be doing something else that's hard? Well, this isn't easy, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you want to put the work in. And I'm making some big plans here at the desk of the Southern Fork, or as I like to say, Southern Fork HQ. And I am really working to be still and respond to that really big pull of something that lights me up from the inside. And I'm excited to share with you what's going to be coming up soon. And I was excited to hear that, Jeremy found that really in his creative process of winemaking. There is such a magic to this kind of way to live your life and following that pull. And I think we need a little more magic in our lives sometimes. Yeah, call me a little woo-woo if you want to, but I, for one, definitely need to feel that I'm going in a right direction. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation today, and I will be right here next week, working furiously behind the scenes to write and produce this podcast, and also get out a newsletter that's going to be coming out soon. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, you can go to stephanieburt.substack.com and sign up there, and it just comes out once a month. It's free, and it gives you a little more information about the episodes, backgrounds, things I'm reading, things I'm thinking about, and of course, articles that I'm publishing or that are being published that I've written. So I hope to see your email pop into that email list, and I look forward to being back here again with you next week. You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?